Welcome to the House of Azor podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining today will be Sean.
Hello.
And Derek.
Hello.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing Return of the Living Dead 3. We've done the original film, Return of the Living Dead. We did not do Return of the Living Dead 2, just because it's a little bit of a...
That's not one many people talk
It's a lesser entry that people don't care as much for, and we don't care as much for. Too, with a lot of these movies, when they're older films that are part of franchises and such, we, like with some of the movies like the Friday the 13th, we've bucketed together multiple films, because if there's some entries you like and some you don't, it's not really going to do a lot just to kind of go and pile on like a middle entry in a series. Even though that would probably get more downloads and more, attention being part of a franchise, but we want to just go and do an episode on Jason Takes Manhattan and just crap all over it. That doesn't really do much, because there are people who are fans of that film.
For the record, I don't hate that film.
Well,
I was excited for it when I was a kid, and I enjoyed it, and I was not disappointed as a kid.
I think a lot of those movies, it depends on your entry point into the franchise, when you watched them. Because there's a lot of cartoons, movies, anything. Your entry point into these series a lot of times can determine which one you like the most. There's probably a lot of people, not a lot, but there's probably a number of people whose favorite Return of the Living Dead film is the second one. It just depends on which one you saw first and how it hits you. Because like the movie The Gate, I saw that as a kid and it scared the crap out of me. Now, if I had seen that a couple years later, probably wouldn't have cared. But I think with The Gate, it was because of the dog stuff that was what upset me.
What was it? I saw that as a kid too and loved it.
Well, their dog died, and then they put it in the pit, and it was like back in the room and stuff.
I don't even remember that. I just remember the claymation demons running around. The dog stuff didn't bother me as a kid.
Well, then they get the phone call.
And I even watched that somewhat recently.
I remember the parents come home and they dissolve into little monsters. That was.
So it's just like stuff like that. So a lot of it just depends on when your entry into these series were. So we're not going to do Return of the Living Dead 2 because I had seen it. Just wasn't a big fan. I don't know if we would have as much to discuss on it.
We might cover it one day. Maybe just cover the series.
If we do the rest of it. But because I think it was this one.
5 of them, right?
So there was 93, but the later ones were like in the 2000s.
So I think the more interesting thing about this entire film franchise is like this exists because I think the director of this worked on Night of the Living Dead. And they both wanted...
Well, not the director of this one. But
the original.
Yeah,
the original director of Return of the Living Dead worked with George Romero, and he wanted to do a continuation, so I think they went to court and they disputed it, and George got the Day of the... any of the Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, that was his franchise.
Of the Dead.
Yeah, of the Dead. And then he got Return
Dan O'Bannon, who also wrote Alien and wrote Life Force.
Did Dan O'Bannon direct the first Return, or did he just write it?
Yes, he directed.
Okay. So that's why in the first one you have them reference, they talk about it being in Pittsburgh, and so they existed in the same place, which is really kind of interesting, is that they, this came out, and that came out in 85, this one came out in 93, so you're talking... Night of the Living Dead came out in 68. So you're talking at that point almost 20 years it went on before. So it's just kind of a little interesting thing to see where
it's a
this
franchise
comes from.
that exists because of a separation of the rights and things from the original series. But these movies are not in the public domain like Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
Because Night of the Living Dead, I saw yet another short film the other day that had a character watching Night of the Living Dead, and it's because it's in the public domain. But so Return of the Living Dead. So the first film was more of a horror comedy.
Yeah. And
it was the series that originated the idea of zombies saying brains.
Yeah. It was the first, because it kind of took a little bit from, like, I Am Legend, where the zombies could talk, and they could still function as normal people for the most extent, especially they could think in, like, we need more paramedics, and they get them more paramedics, we need more cops, like, that was interesting because that hadn't really been done. And then you had you got to watch the two guys transform the zombies through the entire course of the film. So I think that was kind of a cool concept. We didn't see
the
him
thing
much.
I loved about like this one and the first one is how stylized the zombies look. They look like comic book creations, come like a giant comic book panel realized as opposed to, and I think part of that is because especially this one, there isn't an army of zombies, so they can really put focus and the time and effects on the specific zombies that do show up.
When we talk about this, to me, this feels like a much more intimate movie compared to I didn't see the second, but the first one, a lot of other zombie movies. And to me, it felt a lot like Bride of Reanimator and Bride of Frankenstein. Come to find out that the director of Bride of Reanimator and the Reanimator series That's why,
Yeah. And also too, it's like Pet Cemetery, basically.
Yeah,
it's the same concept.
But I think maybe done in a little bit better way.
So Brian Yazuna, have you guys seen Society that he did?
No.
So that was like an early film he did. You have Shudder, right?
Yeah.
Joe Bob did a thing where he did Society, but you guys need to check that out because that has there's a scene at the end of that film that is it's like the build up and release of that film, but also somebody does something to someone that is like a fatality in Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
But it's like these effects of how good the zombies look in this. It's like basically that. The stuff looks so good. But Society also it's a commentary on society. Right. So that film has a lot more going on to it than just being like a schlock or gore horror film, and that's the same thing with this film too. You feel like it's dealing with a lot more stuff.
What I really like about this movie is I'm a huge fan of the Return of the Living Dead. Like I said, 2 is just kind of like a miss.
I haven't seen that since middle school.
Yeah,
so
I haven't. I've watched a little bit of it, and nothing. I've never watched all of it.
So what's funny is the actress Melinda Clarke, who was in Return of the Living Dead, she was in the 1997 Spawn series as Jessica Priest. And then she was also on TV shows like The OC and CSI and Vampire Diaries and Gotham.
And we were talking about this pre-podcast. For whatever reason, because I had watched this movie a long time ago, and this is the, kind of like Mandela effect or whatever.
Yeah.
I, for whatever reason, thought Jamie Presley was the lead actress in this forever, because there's a lot of pictures of her in the full makeup on posters where it looks enough facial features okay, that's her.
Well,
she was probably in that series Poison Ivy around this time.
Yeah, she was probably a little too young to do this because there's a lot of nudity.
Let's see here. Wait, when was Poison Ivy?
Because I'm trying to think.
Wasn't she in those?
She's 8 years younger than Melinda Clarke.
Oh, Poison Ivy, The New Seduction, 1997. So yeah,
she was a little bit because this is 93.
Because so the basic plot of Return of the Living Dead 3 is that there is a military base where they are testing, bringing reanimated corpses back to life, and being able to then resubdue them to put them in storage to utilize them as biological weapons. So predating Resident Evil, which was the Biohazard series and name. So I think they probably took some inspiration from these movies.
They had to,
in that it was sanctioned as a test, uses bioweapons and things like that.
Yeah.
So the Resident Evil movies pulled from the Return of the Living Dead series, definitely the Romero series, and then
I think
Italian
zombie films maybe.
Yeah, so they pulled from a lot of places. Because the zombie reveal in Resident Evil 1 when it first stands up and you see his face is more like a Fulci movie than any Romero movie.
Yeah.
So you have all these different things that, pop culture items that we're aware of that pulled from all these things. And whenever you see somebody walking around dressed as a zombie going, brains, that's from Return of the Living Dead.
Yeah, which pulls more from I Am Legend.
I've seen somebody saying that they're out in public wearing a horror t-shirt and a cashier was like, oh, I love Night of the Living Dead, where the zombie... I think it's kind of dumb, though, when the zombies say brains.
Yeah.
And then that throws a lot of horror fans into a nerdgasm. It's like, but wait, they didn't say it in that. But the average person in a zombie is a zombie, and it says brains. And in Walking Dead, they say brains. It's kind of like everybody calls a soft drink a Coke in this part of the country. And then,
where it gets convoluted is it's the people who made both those movies wrote the first one together. So you kind of have,
So,
most your average person's not gonna.
But this movie revolves around there's the government base where they are reanimating corpses, and then trying to utilize them as a biological weapon, and then to be able to stop them and store them.
So of course during the trial run it goes horrifically wrong and. Essentially the purpose is reanimate the corpse, get them started, then they shoot him in the brain with this bullet
projectile,
that freezes.
Call them.
And it freezes them long enough to get them subdued, put back up into captivity. And then the other scientists give the main character's dad, and that's what he wants to do. The other scientist wants to put them in this full metal contraption that they can lock them
with
up.
An exoskeleton.
Yeah, exoskeleton.
Which I didn't watch this. I've never seen a zombie in an exoskeleton. That's what I love about this film. It's
weird.
And again, they just talk about it in the beginning. So do we want to do full spoilers for this?
Yeah, I think you have to.
I think let's just start for just a minute. Just say, me personally, I definitely recommend watching this film before going into the spoilers. So
it's on Amazon Prime in the United States.
You have to search for the right one. because there's another one that says it's labeled as 2001.
Yeah.
And that's like on Epics or something. I don't know. If you just go there and search properly, it is on Prime. It may be on Hulu or something as well. But do you guys recommend the film?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you like
it.
zombie movies, it definitely does a different direction than a lot of the zombie films. And you could definitely see where a lot of things that came out in the wake of this pulled elements or just explored the same themes. Because this is less, so like you mentioned, it has like these character designs that look like more something out of an EC comic or, Tales from the Crypt or Creep Show or something like that. So it has these designs that feel more unique and look more like monsters.
More stylized.
Yeah.
And
traditional.
and almost has kind of like a body horror element to it, or almost like an anti-hero. Like this could have been a Spawn comic character.
That's how society is. There's a lot of like body horror stuff at the end that just goes insane. But that film is all about like, I don't know if it's supposed to be aliens. I can't remember now. It's been a while, but essentially infiltrating Beverly Hills. Like that, you guys need to check that out. If you like this, you need to check out Society. It's not as some parts maybe don't move as fast as this, and it was an earlier film of his, but definitely check out.
I think a good counterpart to watch with this, being that it is the same director, is The Bride of Reanimator. Because I was doing some reading. I was doing some reading. Yeah, I was doing some reading, and he didn't really get to do what he necessarily wanted in that film. So when he got to do this one, he got more screen time for Melinda Clarke's character, which was kind of the Bride of Reanimator. This felt like the movie he wanted to make with Bride of Reanimator. Yeah. Whereas Bride of Reanimator, which I still enjoy, is just not quite as good and gets kind of... This is, I feel like, more what he wanted to make.
Yeah.
And this one feels more like a fully thought out movie that has... Like I said, for a zombie movie, it's a little bit different because this kind of has more of a vibe of Pet Sematary or just...
Which Pet Sematary is a zombie film.
Yeah, it is. But this is Zombie Mill more in the, like... you reanimate somebody for your own purpose, not necessarily them.
For selfish purposes.
For selfish purposes, and then they are the ones that deal with the fallout, not you.
Yeah.
One, two,
and that's what I like a lot. It deals a lot about like what is humanity, what know what I mean, and all that.
And it also doesn't deal with a society extinction level event. This is more of a narrowed down.
Oh yeah, this is a very
movie.
Small,
and and it kind of disregards the first movie. Like it's not like it's a huge part. Like you would think if you have to nuke an entire city because it gets overran by people who become the reanimated living dead or something, that would be a world changing event. But
not if it was Louisville.
Well, we don't
nobody cares.
But too, though, like you never really know because again, this isn't about that. This is really only specifically about the son, the dad, and his girlfriend. Yeah. And that's about it.
Yeah, it's about Kurt and Julie.
Yeah,
and
you have other characters that intertwine, but it's really about three people, and it's really
Riverman.
Yeah, and Riverman. But it's really just about a small group of people and what happens with them, and that's it.
And because it's narrow focus, I think it touches on a lot of different, things to explore, like again, humanity, all that stuff, using humans as weapons, you know what I mean? Like all these different issues it deals with, but it also, because it's small scale, you get awesome like zombie designs and that are unlike anything you will see in a, of the Dead series.
But to me, this feels a whole lot like a Frankenstein movie. Because that's kind of what this is, and it's kind of his Frankenstein's monster way. But, the only difference is he loved her previously, so it's not like Frankenstein remade this monster out of just some, obsession. It's like you take somebody you love, you reanimate them, and now they have to deal with the consequences
Again, Pet
of it.
Sematary is... Yeah. So, we'll go into spoilers now. So, if you want to watch this film, check out now, because I recommend.
Yeah, because we'll go through all the major plot points.
Yeah. All right, so you were going to say something before I jumped in. Do you remember?
Not necessarily, but I just really... Well, this one both, and this goes back to the original with Trash, is that Melinda Clarke's character and Trash both kind of fantasize about death and being reanimated, and there's always maybe just kind of a throwaway line, because Trash describes how she thinks about death, and that leads into the old strip scene. Mm-hmm. This one, she's just talking about you ever think about death or whatever, so it kind of foreshadows I guess in his mind, okay, if she were to die, I could bring her back, and then they get to watch the entire sequence of them reanimating the individual. And then all I was going to say is you have what I call the Victor Crowley zombie, because it's the first zombie they release with the gas to revive her, and he looks a lot like Victor Crowley's character. Yeah. So I wonder how much of that was influenced, because they look a lot alike, if you remember, because just the way his hair was and the movements and the way the body's built, it looks a whole hell of a lot like Victor Crowley.
Yeah, I mean, like, it was probably just like similar effect. There's only so much you can do with like a mutilated body or things like that. But yeah, so you have they have the test that goes poorly where a couple of doctors die. And
Which happens in like every Resident Evil movie or game where you get to see your sequence.
Yeah,
We just watched something where that happened.
I mean,
it was Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Later Resident Evils when they
I'm saying, like, how many Doom games, because I've been playing Doom, so you got Doom, it happens in Doom, it happens in Quake. Like, this scene always happens where you get to kind of watch the poorly planned,
So then
Westworld.
So then you have that, but then after that occurs, Kurt's dad's going to get reassigned because of the failure. And then the other project is going to go into place that's putting the exoskeletons on the zombies. So Kurt doesn't like it. So him and his girlfriend, it's kind of like this weird thing. It's usually like the dad being disapproving of the daughter's boyfriend. But in this one, it's the dad being disapproving of his son's girlfriend, thinking that she's a bad influence. So he decides he's going to run away and just be with her. And
he's going to get on his bike and go.
He's going to get on his bike and go. For Twin Peaks fans of James Hurley.
Which he actually kind of looks a little bit like the guy from Twin Peaks, because I had to go check and make sure he wasn't that guy.
But then it has a very... so then they're driving on his motorcycle and she decides it's a great idea to start grabbing his crotch and distracting him.
Yeah. Which is hilarious because
kids and adults, wear helmets when you're on a motorcycle. I had a motorcycle and sold it because so many people almost ran me over because everyone's looking at their cell phones now. But if you ride a motorcycle, wear a helmet because this could have made the movie not even happen if she had a helmet.
I think she still would have. I think the fact that she would have flung off of the bike and hit a telephone pole like Wile E. Coyote, I think she would have died either way.
It did.
Pretty much how it happened. Yeah. I think she's dead either way.
It did almost play out like a cartoon level of like...
Absolutely. The only thing she didn't do is stick straight up and have her and just slide down the pole. I mean, other than that, this was...
So she flies up the motorcycle. So she's distracting Kurt by grabbing his junk, and then he doesn't have good control of the bike, and then a semi comes by, and he hits a guardrail, and so she somehow gets launched off and hits a telephone pole, and he's fine.
You hear the crunch, he's dead, yeah.
And
I think the next best scene, though, is when he drives to the military base and she's just like slumped over dead. Their feet are like dragging the ground, and the military guy's like, oh, just through.
Yeah, so he goes back to the base and he's like, I want to see my dad. And then he sneaks in and then utilizes. So Kurt and Julia only saw the beginning of the test, or Julie, they saw the beginning of the test where it worked. They didn't see where it went bad at the end. So he goes in and introduces her to the air vapor stuff to reanimate her. And then in the course of that, another zombie escapes. Yeah, because
he opens up a barrel that has a corpse in it, and then once she reanimates, kind of finds out that she died, and then everything happens. Then before they can process that, the Victor Crowley zombie busts in. He has like one arm that's like fused to his, which breaks off, and it's a pretty cool scene. I mean, like you said, since this is a smaller scale movie, they were able to put more into each zombie.
Yeah.
So you never got like, we just covered the Resident Evil franchise so too long. We do big cuts of just like essentially people with a little bit of white makeup.
You know, like 30 or 40 extras.
I think maybe the most zombies you get on screen at one time is like 3 or 4. Yeah. And they're all very.
So then they're driving off, and Julie's talking about how she's really hungry. So they go to a gas station, and this is something where like, with the most dated element of the Hispanic, I don't know if they're a gang, but
kind of like
they're a little criminal enterprise, a little like
it'd be like chain gangers or something. They're kind of like a small group of.
They're just local roughs.
But it's kind of weird because they're playing arcade games, and I feel like based upon how the age of these men look, and even in the woman, like you look a little too old to be at a gas station causing. Scuffles over.
Maybe, but then again, like they're hanging out in a gang and they're how old? You know what I mean? So, that again.
So basically,
different strokes.
So Julie starts eating all the food and it's not helping, and then they get into a little tussle, and then she bites one of the guys, and then
they shoot
the store owner and steal because one of the guys is stealing the money, and they shoot the store clerk, and they all kind of go their separate ways. But then one of the guys starts feeling negative effects because he got bit, so they decide they're going to go chase him down.
Yeah. And then they're also, at the same time, like, Julie and the other guy, they're going to escape. Then the store owner's, like, taking him to the hospital because he survived. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to take him to the hospital, and then she starts eating him because the cops shoot and kill him, so she eats him, and So then you get kind of the first part where you get to see a couple of different zombies because the store owner turns into a zombie. And then they make their way into the sewers. And at the same time, the gang that they dealt with drives by and see what's going on. And they decide to go into the sewers.
But the most ridiculous...
the whole film is escalation of him, the boyfriend, paying for the bad decision to bring her back. Yes. Like, it's all this is cascading because of a mistake he made.
But then, the monkey's paw or whatever. But, like, the funny thing is, the most ridiculous line of dialogue is when the criminal dudes are driving around. He's like, well, based on their wrath, the only way they could have gotten out is by going in the sewer that comes out here. It's like, so do people just frequent the sewer? I've never gone in the sewer.
Well, I'm assuming since they're a gang of miscreants, like, they know that area.
Yeah.
Probably
well, I'll take that back. I went through a drainage ditch once.
Yeah. I used to go through that stuff all the time when I was little.
I'm saying maybe the only thing I can think of is, like, since they're in a gang and they're in the various activities, they've been through that area before, and like, okay, well, if you go in there, there's only one way out.
Yeah. So they go in, and then
she tries to kill herself.
Kurt and Julie go in, and she jumps in the water, and then the riverman sees them, who is just this kind of guy that lives in the sewer and knows all the ins and outs of it.
But what I kind of like before we get into that is, like, this, you see Julie, you see the transformation of when she's freshly reanimated and she still retains human elements throughout the film. She never loses her humanity. But you see her go from being more level-headed and more what she originally was, but then throughout the film as the zombie gas gets more of a hold of her, she starts to turn more into a creature than human.
Well, when Kurt and Julie go missing and Kurt's dad's there and he's like, well, he'll be okay. They're like, well, she'll probably retain enough to not turn on him.
Yeah, they set that up pretty early on to let you know. Like,
so they set it up. They set up kind of the baseline,
the rules of rules of this.
Because the big difference in this and some of the stuff that dealt with zombies before this is that you get to see her talk about how it hurts. Yeah. Well, they talked about that in the first one too.
Yeah.
But the idea is just when you turn into a zombie, it hurts unless you eat brains. Yeah. But then there's also the element of if you're feeling pain, then that takes away from the inherent hurt.
And that was added in this film. This wasn't in.
So this was they're in the sewer running around.
Like that's some sort of commentary on self-inflicted pain and cutting yourself. You know what I mean? Like what? There's a lot of stuff this thing touches on.
So throughout the point, you see like her and him going through the sewers or getting away. She's inflicting self-pain or self-harm.
Yeah.
To I guess curb the hunger so she doesn't attack.
Which you don't know, that could be like an analogy for addiction or anything.
So then you have like when they're in the sewers and the gang members go in there and then they finally get, caught up to them.
Riverman's a great character.
They got Riverman.
Yeah, Riverman gets him into his room. He's like, look, I'll let y'all hang out and,
What was the...
I'll keep watch.
What was the Kevin Spacey, Haley Joel Osment movie about pay it forward? So this is kind of a take on that. It's like, I did a good deed for you, so here's a coin. The next time you find someone in need, do a good deed for them, give them the coin, tell them the same.
Yeah, you say something like, as long as the coin keeps circulating,
good things will happen. Yeah. So then this is the point of the film where she goes from pretty much still human to this entire scuffle is when she goes full version of the post.
And this is mostly the last third of the film probably or so. Or the back half of it. So this is when like things start to escalate more.
Yeah.
And so what they get caught in the sewers basically. And then she kind of turns into a superhero zombie.
Well, she goes
stylized and everything.
She pierces her nips and runs chains through stuff.
See, and a lot of this came from there's a lot of screen time of her as this full creature. I think a lot of that comes from the Bride Reanimator because he didn't get to do that. So in this one, you see a whole lot of her, and this may have been the original intention for Bride Reanimator, which I'd be interested to read more on that and find out.
So I haven't seen Bride Reanimator, so she only in a little bit. I mean, because
very little.
Because the original Bride of Frankenstein. Yeah. Have you seen that?
Yes.
I mean, she's barely in that. You know what I mean? So maybe that original, maybe they want to stick close to that.
So she, while they're, being kidnapped or whatever, or while they're being kind of held by the gang members or the criminals, she's putting blades through her skin and chains and stuff. So like the titular poster moment of what she looks like, this is when she comes out looking like that.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, oh, that's the kind of girl I like. So he goes back.
Grabs her nipple rings or something at one point and plays
like a chain or something.
Yeah.
So it's implied that he's going to go back and sexually assault her. And then you see them go back, and then you hear him screaming, and then you see her walk out holding his severed head.
The head is connected to the body.
Yeah,
okay, yes, that's right. So his head that's separated with the spinal cord attached to the body, and she drags him out.
And at this point, she's full monster. She's no longer really what he perceived of her, you know. So this is where I think the film starts getting really interesting, because then you have the leader of the gang, he transforms into a zombie. Then you have the guy that got bit earlier, he transforms into the zombie.
Yeah.
And then you also have the woman get bit that's with him, and she transforms into a zombie. So they're trying to hold back, and Riverman ends up, he's like, well, take my girlfriend, get out of here, I'll hold the door. And then you had the leader's head bust through the door where he has the spine, where his head's kind of coming through, which is kind of Evil Dead-ish almost.
Yeah.
And I really like that, because you're talking about that's where you get these really stylized zombies with him. Because where other movie you ever seen where like a zombie has a telescoping
head?
Yeah. Because like the spine can kind of react, and it's bizarre. You don't really get that very much. And, you know, they still have enough of their humanity to realize, like, you know, he doesn't want to eat the boyfriend, he wants to kill her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the kind of interesting thing, is like they still very much have agendas of what they want.
And then
it's a very different zombie film.
And then so you have all of that happen, and then eventually the military finally catches up.
But she kills Riverman. She starts
That's a mistake. So he, you know, Riverman told them to go, and he said, no, you go. You got a bad leg or whatever. Was he shot?
Yeah,
right?
he got shot. Yeah.
And so he comes back, and Riverman's totally dead. Like his head is basically just exploded almost because she was eating him. Which again, this is like him paying for the mistake he made.
And then, you know, then the military shows up
with his
dad, and they
It's
use
like in Resident Evil, right?
They use the freeze gun to stop Julie and stop the others. So then you get this kind of cool, like, I wasn't paying that much close attention to what the time in the movie was. Like, oh, it's probably about over now. But then you're like, oh no, there's like 30 minutes left. Because they get back to the base, and then you see like all of the creatures in holding cells. So you see, you know, like Julie in one where they take all the stuff off, so it's lighter prosthetics of just like, you know, kind of empty piercing holes looking type stuff.
Well, they've like sewed her up from where she's
but then you see just the zombie that's the spinal cord in the head, just kind of bouncing around. And then you see the other ones that were there.
Yeah.
So they have all of them there, and then he finds out that, you know, his dad's no longer in charge. The other woman's project is in place, and they're going to put them in the exoskeletons. And you see they have Riverman, who's liked.
Yeah.
And he's in there, and they're putting him in the exoskeleton, which is like the mechanical exoskeleton. So the idea is they can go in and just like lock it up so it can't move to put him in storage.
Now I was reading a little bit about that. That was an actual made of metal. It wasn't like it was all, and it weighed 75 pounds.
Yeah.
So like they actually made this, and they wore that around. So like that's why there's only one, because it was so bulky and heavy. And it actually had, you know, you think about 75 pounds doesn't sound a lot, but you're walking that around your body.
I mean, it is like a miniature, you know, scene from like the end of Aliens, but it feels almost like a RoboCop thing as well too, where it's like, oh, we're using like man and machine, and then like using something out of his control to make them.
Their idea is to take people that are infected by this and turn into the living dead or whatever, to drop them into an enemy war zone or behind enemy lines, and then once everything's done, go back and collect yours and put them in storage. But then the flaw in that is that by the end of it, everybody there is going to be infected.
Well, I guess unless
it increases your army base.
But I guess unless if you were to put like the mouth guard on them and then teach them how to use weapons, or the exoskeleton could be used, because that way, like, as you see, Riverman gets shot up, but he's still, you can't kill him.
That's like a crazy, I mean, that whole sequence is awesome because like, he can be losing a leg and still going around. Like that whole thing is so awesome.
Yeah, so Kurt sees...
It's so inventive and creative.
So Kurt sees what's going on, and he sees that Julie's, you know, her future is just to be put in an exoskeleton and locked up and to be a weapon and be put in storage when she's not in use, and does not want that to happen. So
because she, of all the zombies, still very much has her humanity, because she was probably the freshest of them when she's reanimated. So she still has the most human side, because she still recognizes him and has thought processes, and
I mean, maybe you know, she's anti-establishment as being like kind of a punk, but more on the nose. What maybe this would have made it worse, but if she was like anti-war, anti-military in the beginning, you know, and then she realized like, oh no, I'm not doing that. You know, it's if you want to take a Vietnam analogy or whatever.
But,
you know,
so he lets them go just because he doesn't want her to suffer that fate. And then like the Riverman, like when he goes on the attack against.
Well, he releases, in order to get her out, he just essentially releases all the zombies.
Yeah.
So then they get a shotgun out and they're trying to shoot them all, and they accidentally release even more zombies because there's another big rumo.
Yeah.
So the entire military underground base just gets infested with zombies. Then the last half, like Riverman kind of sacrifices what he has left of himself to let them get out. And you have Julie and...
Well, like you said, though, so the really cool sequence is he's kind of going after them, and they're using a shotgun against him, and he's in this metal exoskeleton, so if they shoot his arm and blow it up, most of his arm is still gone, but his hand is still attached in the mechanical part of it, so he can still use that hand.
It's so
and then, like,
wild,
one of his legs gets blown out, but he still has the exoskeleton, so he can still walk.
Yeah.
So it's just like them putting in the exoskeleton, it shows you how they could be pretty effective. But it also shows you how it's really tough to control them.
Yeah.
So then, he's biting people and stuff, and then, like all the different zombies are out, and, Kurt's dad's trying to find him and save him. And then they're going throughout, fighting off the other zombies. And it's one of those weird things where, like, these military personnel get shredded by a zombie immediately, but Kurt, who's just seemingly a normal teenager, is able to punch him and knock him back and escape. But that's just, plot armor.
Then he gets bit, so he gets bit, which makes him infected, and it's the point of no return. Then really the entire climax of the movie is like you see a point where the dad and him run to each other, and dad wants to rescue him, but he's been bit. He knows he can't go forward. So this ties it back into the first movie because they find the furnace or
yes, yeah,
and
the crematory.
The crematorium.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
The
too,
movie
when they
ends
showed
with
that
them going to
original.
the crematorium and killing themselves to just kind of end it. And though I think the one thing I like about this movie though is there's still humanity in throughout the entire time. It's relatively small scale. The shit does break loose at the end, but again, like it's all within a military confined place, so it's not like it's escaping to the real world. I like that really the only things that this affected was essentially 3 people. It was...
Well, and all the military personnel and the shop owner.
We're not worried about saying, but as far as like the people that are actually affected within the movies is a group
It didn't
of 3.
affect the world at large.
No, it affected really 3 people, as far as like actual characters that had more than 5 minutes of screen time.
Yeah.
A lot of times in zombie movies, I feel like they feel like you always had to have huge scenes of zombies, and this one didn't do that. This one doesn't really feel like a zombie movie, because I don't think it does. Because I think this feels to me almost more like...
It's almost like a monster movie.
Yeah.
In the traditional respects of like you think a zombie film, oh yeah, it's these people holed up somewhere getting attacked by zombies.
Yeah.
But I think because the zombies are more... I don't know if it makes them more sentient or what, but because you feel like they have more decision making, it makes them feel like monsters a little bit, and just the whole... reanimating aspect almost feels like Frankenstein or a classic Universal monster. It just feels different. The character, there's so much attention to detail and designs. Like it feels like a comic book come to life. It feels, I don't know, almost like a cartoon at times too.
Well, I like too though is like Julie's able to express the fact through the movie that like she didn't want this.
Yeah.
So like it was a selfish decision by him that has now caused her this, and he has to be the one to deal with it. Watching her go from something he knew to a monster. So I think that's an interesting aspect of that, because in a lot of zombie movies, we've kind of talked about this before, is like the one thing you lose on this in almost every zombie movie is the fact that the zombies at one time were actual people.
Yeah.
Where I think the Return of the Dead series is able to, even in the first one that's more of a comedy element, like it kept that in perspective with, these are people at one point, and you got to see them transform from humans to zombies, and you get to see the end, just spoilers for that, but at the end, one of the guys kills himself in the crematorium, the other guy chases after his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, they opt to kill themselves. So I do think that is the more of an interesting part. But I wonder too if it's like the ones that are in the cans, if they've just been zombified for so long, they've lost all their humanity.
Yeah.
Well, it's just kind of whittled away to where they are basically acting on base instinct. And two, like, it's also dealing with, people with drug addiction. If you're in the early stages, it's more likely you can go to rehab and kind of pull yourself back from the edge of that. But somebody that's in the throes of a long-running drug addiction, it's a lot of times that's why people break into houses and steal all that stuff. It's because they have the addiction they can't kick. So maybe it's, I'm sure they weren't going for all this deep parallels to the real world.
I think there's a little bit like.
Well, they may have been doing that.
Knowing Brian is in a society, like again, there's some light stuff. He obviously has fun with the effects and everything, but I think there's more here than your average like copycat zombie film.
This,
you know what I mean?
The one thing I like about this, a lot of times you get sequels made of that, like, why? Like, you go watch these movies, like, you know, because, like, I think, you know, Return of the Living Dead 2 was just a movie that was made because of the success of the first one with the name, whereas this one, it feels like, okay, this actually, somebody had an idea, they had a concept, this is the movie they wanted to make. They probably got to do that with this movie since the second one wasn't so good. The third one, they're probably more willing to take a chance, like, all right, we're going to loosely tie this in with the trifexin gas or whatever it was called, and but that's about it. You know, there's real no continuity from the first two to this one other than they reference it.
I mean, yeah, so you know that like the first movie happened, but it's not a big part of it.
Yeah, and I wonder if that's because, like, you know, if you didn't get to make the movie you wanted with Brighter Animator, you go and make this. This to me feels more of like a.
Well, it's more of a contained, small, because you know. Because this is funny how like the parallels in the Resident Evil films to this, because you know Alice is infected with the T virus, but you know empowers her and stuff like that. So you could easily see this movie, Return of the Living Dead 3, being more of an anti-hero origin story for the Julie character, if that was where they were going to go, but they didn't go in that direction. But like, you know, at the end of it, when she had like this iconic design, it reminded me of stuff out of Image Comics in the 90s, like Spawn and all the Witchblade and all that stuff.
Which this predated that, right? I had to predate Spawn.
It was the middle of that, basically. Because what year was this?
93.
Yeah, which is basically in the throes of it.
Which is funny that she would then be, that the actress would then be in Spawn as Jessica Priest. But it's just the idea is like, you know, that's in that era you had the anti-hero, you know, like Venom and Carnage from the Marvel stuff were popular. Yeah. Kind of like these anti-heroes that had these more monstrous appearances. And with like Venom and Carnage toward like the Maximum Carnage stuff, they did make them look kind of like movie monsters. So you were in that era of the edgy anti-hero type stuff, and I think this movie played into that without going full tilt all the way into it.
Yeah.
Probably because of budget and scope and all that stuff, and you like,
or they wanted to tell a complete story. I mean, they were focused more on the characters instead of jumping into that and being like, you know what I mean, an hour of that and kind of spinning its wheels. Like, I think there was enough of that in this where it made it satisfying. There was, like, I think it was paced very well. Yeah. And again, I like that last, like, almost half-hour sequence. You know what I mean? Where it's just like a cherry on top, where the film could have ended there and been great, I think. But that was, like, even just sent it over the edge.
Like, the only...
But the movie never felt too long. Like,
no, it didn't.
Yeah.
No, yeah, because like I wasn't.
You just got more. You got more dessert.
I mean, and that wasn't me like purposely being like, when I talk about how much time was left, it wasn't me paying attention.
Yeah,
it was I need to use the restroom, so you hit pause and you're like, oh, there's actually a bit more to this left than I thought. Yeah.
And it was like, time well spent.
And you know, like the timing of it, if you were to have this set in the modern era, I mean, the technology doesn't really change too much. There's not too much you would change. The only thing I think that kind of dates it to an extent is the kind of gang being kind of stereotypical Hispanic.
At least it wasn't Jamaican, because at this point in time, like almost every gang in any movie in the 90s at that point was like evil Jamaicans. Because like that was Predator 2 was Jamaicans. Every single
was there some in Bad Boys?
Yeah.
Or was there somebody in Bad Boy that was Jamaican?
Yeah, I just feel like there's a lot of movies set in this period in the 90s where it's like Jamaicans were evil.
Well, I think it's an era where you would have criminals and you would give them an accent and stuff just to give them a memorable edge versus giving them characterizations.
I don't really know where this was set. They never really specify maybe. If they did, I just don't remember.
Non-distinct town.
Yeah. I'm going to assume out west.
Because you don't get a ton, like I'm sure they probably shot in California. You didn't get a ton of insight as to where they were shooting. But I mean, a lot of movies, because was even 7 is one where it looks like it's New York, but they go to the desert.
Yeah.
So a lot of movies just kind of set up these worlds. Because like The Return of the Living Dead, the first one's set in Louisville, Kentucky, but wasn't shot in Louisville, Kentucky, and didn't resemble it in any way, shape, or form.
So it's had a $2 million budget.
Which really being...
It seems like they put it all towards their effects.
Made $54,000.
I would assume that it was one that was made more for the video market.
But I thought I saw something. The reason it said 2001 on Amazon, I thought it said something about that the home release didn't happen until like 2001.
Oh.
I thought I saw that somewhere.
Well, I know, like...
which is very weird, but...
I've seen the same thing, because that's why when I saw 2001, that's probably why I thought Jimmy Presley was in it. Because originally I thought this was in 2001, but then it's in 93, so I don't really know what's up with that. And there might be maybe a different cut that was released in 01. Because apparently in order to get the R rating, they had to cut like 50 or 60 sequences out of it.
Yeah.
So there may be the version we watched might not be the version they released in theaters.
This film was released unrated on VHS, so I guess it was sent to VHS. I don't know, to the R-rated theater cut. In what you mentioned, he trimmed 50 to 60 moments. It's probably supposed to be minutes to get the R rating. I'm interested to see what this ended up doing, but it probably didn't do great for them because they didn't do part 4 until early
2000.
Was 5 Rave to the Grave? I remember seeing 5 on Sci-Fi Channel around the time when that came out.
I guess my thing too, this movie is like, I wonder if this just, because this was pre-Zombie Boom, because Zombie Boom didn't happen until another 10 years later pretty much, and we're kind of in the ends of that now, I think. But, and this was post George Romero Zombie Boom in the 60s and 70s and some of the 80s. So I wonder if this movie is just not successful because maybe the second movie was not very well received.
And you don't know how many theaters it was released to.
Well, because let's see, because Return of the Living Dead 2 is 1988. So the original Return of the Living Dead was 85. The sequel was 88, so 3 years later. And this one was 93, so that was 5 years later. So, it's 10 years after the original. And then after that, you had Return of the Living Dead Rave to the Grave and Return of the Living Dead Necropolis. They were both in the 2000s.
Yeah, and I would say none of those had either.
So I think that the zombie stuff, so you had Night of the Living Dead that ignited that genre of the American zombie film. Because before that, you had zombies in terms of...
They were usually voodoo.
This was apparently in 9 theaters.
Yeah,
that's why... So I guess it was made for the video market. So weird, though.
Well,
and it had a good budget and it looked like a good movie. It wasn't like it felt cheap.
So you had the zombie boom that kind of, so you had Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and then you had the Fulci movies, and you had the Italian zombie films, and you had kind of a cycle that it kind of, wound down by the 90s with the zombie stuff, and it was kind of reinvigorated by the video games, by the Resident Evil games. And then in terms of the actual films, those kind of came back around in the 2000s with 28 Days Later, the Dawn of the Dead remake, Shaun of the Dead, and then the Walking Dead comic.
The Dawn of the Dead remake actually probably had the most to do with it.
Yeah.
Well, Dawn of the Dead... Because
Shaun of the Dead, I think it had its fans.
Well, I think that 28 Days Later was a big one, though, too.
It was big, but I think the Dawn of the Dead one was
for United
States. It was a more pop.
It carries
for
US
thing. For the US, I think... I'm trying to remember the dates all those came out, but just you had that wave that started with those movies. I would say the kind of Dawn of the Dead, 20 Days Later, Shaun of the Dead.
This one fell in where it was at the end of all the Romero, the 70s Italian, all that was done at this point. You're talking this movie at least predated the zombie boom we're just now coming out of in the mid 2000s by a decade. It predated that. So this was in a weird spot where zombie stuff, and this predated the Resident Evil franchise by 3 years. So it just kind of fell in a spot where maybe these films weren't as popular, and like you said, maybe it was released more toward the home market. It only hit 9 theaters.
Well, and two, that's back in the era when you had the Fangoria magazines and the different stuff like that. You
still
had
have them now.
Well, I'm just saying, but that was pre-internet message boards and all that stuff. So that was back when people rented stuff on video from video stores, and you still had a market for stuff like that. Because today, you mentioned if it had a limited theatrical run, just a few theaters, that's similar to how Netflix handles things or Amazon, where you have a movie they acquire. So, back in the 90s, it was you may release it in a few theaters, take it to a few festivals, but then you got it on VHS to sell copies and get it in Blockbuster and home rental stores or video store rentals.
And two, if you look at the movie's poster, it is, or the box art, it is pretty striking because it's her in her fully formed transformation. Which I think that's one of those things as a kid.
I never did rent it, but I would have rented that if I had ever saw it.
If you walked and you saw it, that would be a very striking cover art that you would want to watch.
Because I was a kid, you go to the video store, a big draw to a lot of movies is the box art. Because I remember a lot of box art for movies I still have not seen.
Yeah, and this
I remember
very good box art.
Ones I have seen, like Dead Alive, I still remember that box art.
Yeah,
there's a lot of movies.
Stolen them out.
I always stared at the Silence of the Lambs when the mall.
Yeah, the mall. There's a lot. So a lot of that stuff just creates an aura to it. So them having the box art and the poster for this movie they did made it more appealing and look like more than just a standard zombie film. So I don't really know where this ranks in the pantheon of overall zombie films in terms of just rating the movie itself. Because I know it got relatively mixed reviews when it came out, but any of these types of movies tend to get mixed reviews from critics, at least, especially back in the 90s before, genre cinema was a little bit more respected. But like on IMDb, so the Metacritic, a lot of these scores, there aren't a ton of scores. Like the Metacritic score was 47, but there's only 5 reviews.
Yeah.
Now the user score is a 5.9 out of 10.
But see, I still feel like that's even pretty low.
And like there's a lot of this stuff, but I think that in terms of like rating it in terms of what it did different and how it stands out against the zombie films, like it's at the top. It's like a higher tier. It's not like the world changing zombie movies like Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead. But it's definitely to me better than a lot of like the knockoffs and sequels.
But see, I have to disagree with you because I feel like on a lot of stuff, like this isn't your normal schlock zombie movie that it follows the same.
Well, I'm not saying. I'm just saying like the cultural impact it had nowhere near of like the Night and Dawn.
Yeah, it didn't. But I can maybe argue this is a much more enjoyable film to watch. I mean, I feel like you could give
the Night or Dawn.
Yeah, because those are boring.
So I would say,
so Night of the Living Dead, the original, like you're talking a movie from '68.
I still watch that. I've always loved it.
So I'm not talking about you though. I'm talking about if you just went and grabbed a random group of people and you sit them down to watch Night of the Living Dead 1968, that's a boring ass movie. I'm sorry.
Here's the thing:
it depends on the crowd.
So here's the thing:
general people. So not to say it's not good, but it's
so when I've mentioned that a lot of short films or indie films have people watching it. The reason it rings so false is because you have a modern audience that aren't the horror movie aficionados who are watching the original Night of the Living Dead and viscerally reacting to it, which you would not have happen because CSI has far more. CSI on CBS at 8 p.m. in primetime TV has far gorier sequences than what Night of the Living Dead did. At the time it came out, it scared the crap out of people.
Well, I mean, The Exorcist did, and Amityville Horror had people like puking all over themselves.
But I think that the difference. So I think what we're saying is, in terms of like modern rewatchability, this definitely ranks against some of the classics.
The only thing is, this is such a weird movie that, like, when you get toward the end of the military base stuff, what you have going on there, I think for a general audience is pretty off-putting. So I could see like where you might be able to just, if you're going to have a large part of people over, like when you go watch this movie, you're going to have 2 people. I feel like the 2 consensus for this movie is either 1, that's awesome, or 2, what the hell did I just watch? And I think this kind of follows like the same trope as Reanimator. Reanimator, I feel like probably does the same 2 things. Like you have a group of people that love it, then you have like, what the hell did I watch? And this is that movie. This is either you're going to love it or you're absolutely hate it. I don't feel like there's like
the difference is like a lot of zombie movies really fall apart in their third act because even ones that are well regarded, like 28 Days Later, the third act is weaker than the 2 that follow the first and second act.
Yeah. And this one's third act. I feel
because
like
a lot of times those movies devolve into military base people running around, which is what this one does too.
Yeah.
But I think it's just because of budgetary concerns and stuff. There's not a lot of stuff you can end it with unless you have a huge budget.
Yeah.
But this was also prior to a lot of those films that did that.
I also feel like, too, though, when they ended, I feel like this movie ended the way the director wanted it to end as opposed to, I don't have the money. So
and it thematically followed what was set up. It wasn't just a kind of slapdash third act where they ended up at.
Here's one of the things I think stopped this movie from being great, because it's a big thing, too, is the music.
Yeah,
I don't think the music's
music.
Like, I think the music in something like Night of the Living Dead or Dawn, those give it, like, some gravitas, I think.
Yeah.
Where this music feels like we don't have a lot of money. It's the 90s.
Yeah, so I think a big thing, like you said, a big thing that kind of holds it back is just not having a memorable score. Mm-hmm. At least it doesn't have the generic, not like 90s rock under everything like some movies do.
Yeah.
Or the Troll 2 music where it just sounds like knockoff Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah.
So I think if it had a different score, that could have really left it a lot more memorable.
It's just serviceable for this era and this budget.
Like, it's not terrible. It's just there's nothing that's memorable or moments that are really sold by it.
And like in the 85.
It pulled me out of it sometimes.
Yeah. Like 85, you had a bunch of like punk rock bands at the time that gave them music. So while you may not have loved it, it was still much more memorable.
And it probably had to do with the budget too. But apparently, so they were going to release in theaters, but I think Warlock 3 or 4 or something didn't do well. So the distributor said no, they pulled it back. And so that's why I ended up. So, yeah, I mean, it's just the nature of it. But, there's little things in there that stop it from being truly great, I think. And I'm not saying the tone may stop it from being truly great, but it's just, it's like it wants to be a B movie and it does it so well, I think. But it also has more to it. It has something to say, I
would say this movie had no business being good. You're talking about
you wouldn't have thought a third Return of the Living Dead after the second one.
Yeah, because this is almost 10 years after the original. It's multiple years after the second. It's a third movie that was essentially a directed VHS sequel. No business being a watchable movie.
Yeah.
And it turned out pretty well, for what it is, and it had a clear vision and direction what it wanted to be. And I think maybe being VHS maybe helped it, because if it was being a theatrical release, maybe they didn't get to do everything they wanted to do.
Well, no, they planned on being theatrical. It planned on being theatrical.
It's just kind of weird.
It just got pulled last second.
Yeah, let him do this.
Yeah, but so I guess we can go into giving our scores out of 10. So out of 10, like this one's a little bit hard to rate. I mean, in terms of versus expectations, because I hadn't really watched this one. I'd only seen the box art and seen stuff here and there. The second one I had seen, and then of course the first one. I give it like a 7 or 7.5. Like it's there was more to it than I thought, and a lot of stuff it could have went more into. So it's definitely like a top of the heap when it comes to like these sequels and the lesser known movies. But it's not like a pantheon of like top 5 or top 3 zombie films.
I'm an 8 out of 10. It's just, to me, it shouldn't have been good, and it was, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I give it at least an 8 out of 10. Like I was almost thinking about 8.5 because I really love the designs. I'm like, I kind of want to dig into more Brian Mizuno films.
Yeah.
After seeing Society and this, and he's not like, he's not like some hidden master of cinema, but like he's got something there enough to kind of check out more of his films. And I do want to see Bride of Reanimators, so I definitely it makes me want to check out more of his films, but I definitely recommend checking out Society. Again, that's not the fastest paced film. It was an earlier one, but like the Joe Bob watch is good because throughout it, like even if some parts maybe aren't as exciting as the other, he gives you so much flavor text and behind the scenes stuff that it makes it interesting. So yeah.
Yep, so I guess that'll wrap up our discussion of Return of the Living Dead 3, which is currently on Amazon Prime. I'm sure you can buy it on whatever format you want as well.
It's actually kind of hard to find.
Is it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was going to buy it on Blu-ray, but it's kind of expensive and it's hard to find.
Well, it's on Amazon Prime now if you're in the U.S. I'm not sure about internationally, but so that'll wrap up our discussion of Return of the Living Dead 3. You can find all the stuff we're doing at hbtvs.com. It has links there to all of our social media accounts, to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all that stuff. You can find all the stuff we're doing there. And if you're listening to us via any podcast app, it will help us out if you leave a review. We always enjoy seeing the comments and everything on YouTube. So let us know if you have any feedback or if this is one of your favorite movies or not. What you think of that series, The Return of the Living Dead. But yeah, so that'll wrap up this episode of the House by Zero podcast. Thanks for listening.